My name's Kelsey, and you seriously won't believe what happened to me. One minute, I was living a normal teenage existence. The next minute, my life was flipped upside down, and I had to deal with something so humiliating that even telling you about it makes my skin crawl. Sometimes we find out people aren't who we thought they were. And I was seriously in for a shock when I discovered the truth about this new friend of mine. It all started last summer. All my friends had summer jobs, and I didn't want to be the only one sitting at home doing nothing. It's not like I really needed the money because my family is pretty wealthy, but I was bored. So I applied for a job at a small cafe in town. It was like the cool spot where all the hip people hung out, kind of like a student vibe. When I found out I got the job, I was so excited. The girl who interviewed me was slightly older than me, definitely a student, and she said she really liked my surname and that it was pretty unique. She had the most gorgeous long black hair and tons of cool piercings, and even a tattoo. She honestly just looked like she belonged on the cover of some awesome rock and roll magazine. And I was like, okay, when I'm older, I want to be just like her. Her name was Rosie, and we somehow always seemed to be on the same shift. The more I got to know her, the more I realized how much we had in common. She liked all the same bands as me, and she even played the guitar too. She was studying English literature at one of the local colleges, and I told her that's what I was wanting to study too, and that my dad was a professor in English lit as well, and maybe she knew him? But she said she'd never heard of him, and then changed the subject. At work, we'd always have our lunch break together, and I used to bring us cookies and other sweet treats to share. Sometimes, we'd go to the park and just lie there and chill. It was so nice. I started getting more and more excited about work, and I quickly realized how much I liked this girl. Rosie was everything I wanted to be, and yet I think there was something more. I was only 15, so I couldn't really understand what I was feeling, but I started to like her. I never thought I could be attracted to a girl before, but she had this air about her that just made me feel excited. Like butterflies in my stomach excited. I realized this was the first girl I'd ever had a crush on, and it was such a new feeling for me. One day, when we were lying in the park, she rolled right over to me and propped herself up on her elbow and said, "You know what, Kelsey? You're pretty awesome." My heart was thudding so much I was terrified she'd hear it, and I realized how much I liked her. I felt so shy, I didn't even reply. I just laughed and told her we better get back to work. That whole shift, I kept watching her, and eventually plucked up the courage to ask her if she wanted to hang out after work. I told her my parents were out, and maybe she could bring her guitar and we could jam. She was keen and said she'd drive over later that night. As I cycled home, I decided tonight would be the night I'd tell her I liked her. Wait, was this a date? Was she coming over as a friend or because she liked me in that way too? I was seriously overthinking it all. Either way, we'd have a nice night. Rosie arrived not long after I got home, and I decided to give her a tour of our house. She couldn't believe how big our place was. I swear, her jaw literally dropped when I showed her our cinema room. It was so bizarre because it seemed like she knew where to go. I didn't even have to show her where her bathroom was. She asked if we could watch a movie instead of playing guitar, and I said sure. I told her to make herself at home while I went to make us some popcorn. As I waited for the popcorn to finish being made, I noticed Rosie was staring at our family photos in the hall. She reached out and touched one of the photos, and I saw her smiling. My heart fluttered. She was seriously into me. Maybe we'd even kiss in the cinema? That thought made me nervous, and I hoped I wasn't sweating. I always sweat when I'm nervous. She came into the kitchen and said, "No wonder you're so pretty, Kelsey. Your parents are seriously attractive." I just laughed, but could feel myself blushing. We headed to the cinema room, and halfway through the movie, I heard my parents coming home. I was pretty bummed because Rosie hadn't even made a move, not even to hold my hand. I tried the whole yawn and stretch thing to put my arm around her, but she didn't even notice. Anyway, I thought maybe we should pause the movie and she could come meet my parents. I suggested this to her and she completely froze. She suddenly made up an excuse about needing to get home quickly, and was there maybe a way she could sneak out? She said she felt awkward around parents because they always judged her piercings and she didn't want them thinking she was a bad influence on me. I was kind of confused, but told her she could take the back door and they wouldn't notice. Afterwards, I felt kind of weird. Maybe she didn't like me after all. Or maybe she was trying to protect me in case my parents weren't okay with me liking girls. She'd been in such a rush that she left her guitar. I took it through to the kitchen and left it on one of the chairs and said goodnight to my parents. The next morning when I came downstairs, my dad was holding the guitar and he had this odd expression on his face. When he spotted me standing there, he quickly put it down and in an angry tone he said, "Kelsey, whose guitar is this? Why is it here?" I couldn't understand why he was angry. I said it was my friend's from work and that she left it here by accident. Then he got even angrier and said why did I think it was okay to have a friend over from work without asking. Then he demanded to know who this friend was. I told him to chill out, and then I just grabbed the guitar and headed for the door. Who did he think he was? Shouting at me for having a friend. I was so anxious on the way to work. What if my dad just had a sense that I was into this girl? Rosie was her usual cheery self at work and apologized for rushing off the night before. I asked her if she wanted to hang out again sometime and maybe we could play our guitars for real this time. She said she'd like that and that she was free that afternoon. I knew my dad would be at work, so I told her to come over. That shift went by so slowly. At lunch, Rosie went out to meet a friend, and so I had to eat lunch by myself. We cycled back to my place together, and I noticed my mom was at home. I asked Rosie if that was okay with her, and she seemed a bit uncomfortable but said it was okay. My mom was the sweetest woman, so she had nothing to worry about. When my mom met Rosie, she said, "Oh, so nice to meet you, Rosie. You must be Kelsey's new friend that she's been talking about so much. Such a pleasure to meet you." I was not prepared for the way Rosie responded. She had this strange look on her face. It was the first time I ever saw her look cold. She just looked at my mom and said, "Oh, you look so different in real life. Those photos of you in the hall must be pretty old, right?" Then she just walked away and headed for my room. I was mortified. My mom tried to shake it off and feigned a little smile. I knew I'd be in deep trouble later. Both my mom and my dad wouldn't want me hanging out with this kind of girl. When I got to my room, I didn't say anything. I thought she might at least apologize, but she was just looking at my bookshelves and didn't seem to care. I tried not to let it bother me. After all, she'd said she gets awkward around parents. I put on some music and lay down on my bed. "Where's your guitar, Rosie?" I suddenly asked her. I realized she hadn't brought it with her. Her eyes widened a bit, and then she stuttered and said, I actually left it at my friend's at lunchtime. Sorry, Kelsey." I tried not to get annoyed, but I felt kind of jealous that she had this other friend. "Why don't you call your friend and ask if we can swing over and pick it up?" She said her friend was working and wouldn't reply to his messages whilst at work. My heart sank. I knew it. This friend was probably her boyfriend. What had I been thinking? She wasn't into me at all. Suddenly, I felt kind of sick and didn't want her in my room. "Rosie, sorry, I'm actually not feeling very well. Can we take a rain check and hang out tomorrow instead?" She looked a bit surprised, but said sure, and that if I wasn't feeling well tomorrow, I could call in sick and she'd cover for me. I cried a bit when she left, and then I felt stupid for crying and told myself to get over it, and I took a nap instead. When I woke up, I was feeling hungry, so I headed downstairs to make a snack. My dad had just arrived home, and he was unpacking groceries from the car. I went to help him, but he told me it was okay, he'd manage. I still went to help him, and as I pulled out the last grocery bag, I froze. You won't believe what was hidden at the back of my dad's trunk. I knew it as soon as I saw it. With those cherry stickers, it couldn't be anyone else's. Why on earth did my dad have Rosie's guitar in his car? This made no sense. I'd given it back to her today, and she left it at her friend's place. And then it dawned on me, and I felt like I was going to throw up. The way she looked at my family photos, the way she'd insulted my mom, the look of recognition on her face when she hired me and had seen my surname. The fact she studied English Lit. Oh my goodness, Rosie was having some kind of affair with my dad. I felt so overwhelmed. I couldn't deal with my dad right now, and I didn't want to hurt my mom. I knew what I had to do. I jumped on my bicycle and cycled to Rosie's apartment. I'd never been there before, but I didn't even knock. I just barged through the door, and when she saw me, she looked so shocked. I was so angry that I just started screaming at her. "How could you? I saw your guitar in my dad's car. Pretending to be my friend just so you could get closer to my dad? What kind of sicko are you? He's a married man." She didn't even try and deny it. She didn't even cry or try and beg for forgiveness. She just looked at me and said, "It's not my fault your dad likes me. Friends in the family, right? You liked me too, didn't you?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and I didn't know what to do. My mom would be devastated, but I had to tell her, and I had to confront my dad. I told Rosie I never wanted to see her again, and I flung her guitar onto the ground and secretly felt super satisfied when it cracked in two. Served her right. When I got home, my dad was sitting outside on the porch. He knew I knew, and he just sat there with his head in his hands. I knew he told my mom. I could hear her crying inside. I went straight to comfort her. It all felt so surreal. Just a few hours ago, I brought this girl into my house that I had a crush on, and this whole time she was sneaking around having an affair with my dad. My dad could lose his job, and at this moment, I hope he did. He deserved punishment too. I sat with my mom as she cried, and I apologized over and over again for having brought that monster into our home. My dad packed a bag and went to stay with his brother, and Mom and I thought about what to do next. Obviously, I quit my job at the cafe. I didn't want to be anywhere near Rosie. I felt crushed. I lost the girl I liked, and now my dad too. I was just so embarrassed. And if it wasn't already bad enough, what happened next just sent another blow to my family. Clearly, Rosie was sick in the head. The next week in the newspapers, there was a whole story about it. Rosie had sold their story to the reporters, and now my dad would never be able to work as a professor again. Surely, it couldn't get any worse. Well, for my family, it did. Dad did lose his job, and he lost his too. Of course, Mom filed for divorce, and it's almost been a year since it all happened. And we're only just recovering now. It has been the hardest year, and the newspapers had published all the details. Their affair had been going on for more than a year, and she'd even been to our house before. There was a photo of them in our pool. No wonder she'd known where that bathroom was that time. Honestly, the whole thing just disturbs me so much, and I'm glad it's in the past. I've decided I definitely don't want to be like Rosie when I grow up. And as for Mom and me, well, we're better off without Dad. Maybe we'll forgive him one day, but right now, it's still too raw. Anyway, onwards and upwards. What did you think of my story? Crazy, huh? Let me know in the comments below.